Hey, hi. You don't know me and I don't know you, so we're in a good place. My name is John Lentz, and I am visiting my wife, Deanne, who you'll meet. She comes to church a lot. But I'm from Cleveland Heights, Ohio, and originally from the DC area. And my dad worked back in the 50s and early 60s for everybody else worked, the U.S. government. And so that's where I was raised. And then found my way to Cleveland Heights, Ohio, an extraordinarily wonderful, progressive congregation that frankly has a lot of the same vibe as First Church Santa Fe. So walking in these doors, I feel very much at home, and it's a real pleasure to be with you. And since we're an intimate group, and I've already confessed that I'm good with faces and bad with names, and so as we get to know each other, I'll probably be asking you 5 or 6 or 7 times to truly. I won't forget you. If really in a week, if I see you out in the street, I'll be like, I think I know you from someplace. Could we just go around and let me hear your name so we can create a space of familiarity and friendliness? You were at the 8:30 service.
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Elizabeth. Wynn Lewis. Wynn Lane. Alice Tickle.
Alice from Dallas.
That's right.
You get a hook, it helps me.
Yeah, it is fine. Yes.
Dick Lingo.
Okay.
Jim Brown.
Oh, I'll always remember that. Coming from Cleveland. Famous money guy.
Baker Street.
Scott.
Scott.
Enjoyable. Mary Morris.
Tulin.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you for coming today. About 5 years ago, when I turned 65, I wanted to do something and push myself physically. So I decided to run the Cleveland Triathlon. So just wondering if I can run. We've all done it. But I feel like this morning, in the midst of the church triathlon, 8:30 service, adult ed and 11. So if I'm mumbling or stumble around, forgive me. It's needed an energy drink.
You're not used to doing that.
But it's been a while. When you get retired, you go out of rhythm.
I know.
And I used to run
or something.
and then we almost always go to church on Sunday. Anyway, hi, people on screen. Can you wave to me? There you go. Hi, John Lentz and Tony and Bob and Kathy. Bob Barnes, I know you. Oh my gosh, John Lentz. We're connected through the church in Cleveland. He served that church for a while. I remember. Oh, I'm so glad to see you, sir. Good to see you.
And Tony Arnold is our member from out of town. Tony does not live in Santa Fe,
Okay.
but he's a member of our church.
And he joined during COVID when he hadn't even been here.
Oh, that was cool because we actually had a member during COVID. We had who was from India. And that could be a whole nother story, but he started tuning into Forest Hill Church. Somebody who had been at a conference in India and met him at Oral Mountains Church in Cleveland. So we started coming in through with our live stream, and he wanted to be baptized. Now, how do you baptize somebody in India? And somehow we found a Presbyterian pastor in India who would be willing on behalf of Forest Hill Church to baptize him, and then he became a member of Forest Hill Church. So it is cool. So that's one great thing, one good thing about COVID, we get to expand okay, as a way of introduction, I've been given now about 35 minutes, so we'll be tight, it's okay. Both this congregation and I are in a state of transition. Harry left several months ago, and I know that you're looking for a transitional pastor, and that's one part of the process to getting a full-time, long-term pastor. And I wish you the best blessing on both of those processes. I'm fairly recently retired, in a year, and I'm still in the transition of knowing what my call is, my life is going to be about in this sort of third chapter of my life. I think our world is in transition, certainly our country is in transition. The larger church is in transition. And so that's kind of what I want to think about today. And I'm going to shamelessly promote a book that I just finished writing called What's Faith Got to Do with It? Learning to Love and Live the Questions. Because I think as we go forward, and I'll tell you about how I came up with this, because in talking particularly to church members and younger people, and then skeptics and doubters and non-affiliated, that's the fastest growing group in America these days, and folks from other religious traditions, and just kind of listening to the questions they raise. And in my own mind, it's like, what kind of church is going to be there for us in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? It's the church. It's not my church, it's not your church, it's God's church, thank goodness. And so it'll be something, because I think people always long for community, long to be known, long to have questions, curious people gather around questions and mutual concern. But it may be that the church looks very different. And I think particularly for churches like First Presbyterian Church, like the church I serve, really dynamic, progressive, I'm not sure I love this metaphor, but I use it all the time because it just makes sense. In our church, we were like a medium-sized church, 450 members. But we were like a leader in our Presbyterian, a leader in Cleveland. So I was going to be like a boxer that punched above its weight. I get the sense about that at First Presbyterian too. You guys may not be the biggest church, but I think you carry something of faithfulness into this community that really makes a difference. And so I want to begin by handing out and looking at some research, the executive summary of the Religious Landscape Study of the Pew Research Center. Every 10 years they put out a very comprehensive survey on the state of religion in America. And I just thought it'd be interesting, to go over this, because this was very instrumental in the work that I was doing in thinking about the church in the future and in the interaction I had with some of the members. And well, let me read some of these things. So I think it's really, really fascinating, and I'd love them to hear. Oh, no, but you should have them. Okay. And then let's have a little conversation about what you see in this that it catches your attention, that may be indicators of where the church may need to go. So you can see it was 2023-2024 Religious Landscape Study at Pew Research Center. And here it is. 62% of U.S. adults still subscribe themselves as Christian. 40% are Protestant, 19% are Catholic, and 3% are other.
Wonder how many are MAGA?
Pardon?
Wonder how many are MAGA?
That is a very good question. Hold that question. 29% are religiously unaffiliated, 5% are atheists, 6% are agnostics, and 19 identify religiously as nothing in particular. And then 7% belong to religions other than Christianity. 2% are Jewish, 1% Eastern Muslim, Buddhist, or Hindu. Okay? Some key measures of religious belief and practice also have held fairly steady in these recent years. 44% of U.S. adults say they pray at least once a day. Let's just do, how many of you pray once a day? It's okay. Okay. About 44%. Though down significantly from 2007, the measure has held between 44 and 46%. 33% say they go to religious services at least once a month. Well, pardon?
I think that sounds like a big percentage.
A lot of people do. And large majorities of Americans have a spiritual, supernatural outlook, according to the survey. then you can see 86% believe people have a soul or spirit, in addition to the physical bodies. 83% believe in God or a universal spirit. 79% believe there is something spiritual beyond the natural world. And 70% believe in heaven, hell, or both. But here are some, some more interesting figures. But in future years, we may see further declines in the religiousness of the American public for several reasons. Young adults are far less religious than older adults, which is true. I mean, I have 3 children. They're all moral, good people. No one go to church. Pardon me?
We can all identify.
Yeah, absolutely. No recent birth cohort has become more religious as it has aged.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think that means? Unpack that for me.
Well, cohort is.
A generational, I would say a generational, right? And so, like, I would say an example would be, my children, of course, went to Sunday school. They were raised very religiously. As they aged, they didn't stay that way. Doesn't mean they're not moral, doesn't mean they don't pray, doesn't mean they don't care about important things that we all share. They're just not institutional
The question is,
connected.
do they expect to come back when they have kids?
Well, that's a thought. I think that is a trend in some places. But I do think that it's becoming harder and harder for that, just based on schedules and the where you form community. And I think, for instance, I know some, and I bet this is something that happens at First Presbyterian Church, is here, a young progressive couple raise their kids and they love this church. Then they move to another location. It's hard to find another First Presbyterian church in Santa Fe. And so it's like, then what do? I don't want to go to, yes, ma'am, Marty.
You remember my name, very good. I'm not sure if the people online can hear you with all your living around.
Oh, can you hear me?
John, if you'll stand there, none of this is restricted, but if you stand on the other side.
Yeah.
Tony says he can hear you. Tony's got his thumb up.
Okay, thank you.
And Bob reads it online, so we should.
Oh, good, okay. Thank you, though.
Speaker's right in front.
And you, oh, there it is. Okay, thank you for that, because I tend to lose myself. Okay, so no reason for the stickiness of religion upbringing seems to be declining. That's related to the previous. Compared with older people, that doesn't include any of us in this. Fewer younger adults who had a highly religious upbringing are still highly religious as adults. The stickiness of non-religious upbringing seems to be rising. So in other words, folks that weren't raised, if I'm understanding this incorrectly, and I want this to be a conversation. So my reading is, if you were raised non-religiously, you're probably going to stay that way. Right? Okay, this is the 3rd time Pew Research Center has conducted this study. The second was in 2014. Other key findings for the new study include 35% of U.S. adults have switched religion since childhood, leading to net gains for the unaffiliated population and net losses for the Christian population. All 3 major strands of Protestantism have declined in percentage terms since 2007. Evangelical Protestants now make for 23%, that's down from 26%. Mainline Protestants, those of us who are part of that, are 11%, down from 18%. Members of historically black Protestant churches make up 5%, down from 7%. The share, and here this may be, it doesn't name MAGA or like right-wing conservative churches, but some of this may suggest, and we can unpack this a little bit more, the share of Americans who identify with non-denominational Protestantism is growing. Many of the Protestant denominational families, you can read them, have declined. The United Methodist Church, which is splintered in recent years, now makes up slightly than 3% of the U.S. adults, down from 5%. Last 4 bullet points. Gender. Women remain more religious than men in the United States by a variety of measures, such as prayer frequency and belief in God or the universal spirit. but the gender gap in religiousness is less pronounced among the youngest adults than among older people, and is slightly smaller today than in 2007. Still, women in every age group are at least as religious as men. Political ideology. The share of self-described, I think this is really very interesting and telling. The share of self-described political liberals who identify as Christian has fallen 25 percentage points since 2007, from 62 to 37. So, among self-described conservatives, we always think of the conservative church, the non-denominational churches are growing. They're not either, they're just declining at a smaller level than mainline progressive churches. All right, that declined 7 points. Race and ethnicity, 66% of adults who attend religious services say that most or all people in their congregation of the same race or ethnicity as they do. Even more, 78% say this was true of the religious services they attended as children. So Dr. King's statement about 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in America still kind of holds true. And then immigration status. A majority of U.S. immigrants, 58%, are Christian. About a quarter of foreign-born adults are unaffiliated, and 14% belong to other religions, including 4% who are Muslim, 4% Hindu, 2%. So there you have the executive summary of the Pew Study. So I'm just wondering, anything jump off the page at you that you want to note? We had one comment about how much of this is MAGA Christians. The one thing that wasn't in the executive summary, but I actually read the whole 162 pages of it. One of the things that was fascinating, and I really was troubled by it, but that shows my bias and position. The one area of upswing among young adults was actually in young right-wing conservative people, who now kind of see, in one of the comments, was this sort of MAGA evangelicalism, a sign of new kind of identity and power and community. And I don't know if you read the New York Times article a couple of months ago, I forget who the author was, but she was talking about the cross now as a fashion accessory. And you see it on all the powerful women in Washington. And they feel like women of power need to be identified with this rise of a powerful kind of Christianity.
I had a question with the 25% decline of self-identified political since 2007. How does that square with anything given that it's that in the first era is relatively stable since 2019? Now that's everybody. Obviously it's not just liberals, but I'd be curious about, so it's been dipping since 2007, has it also maybe started to dip less in recent years, in the past 5 years, since 2019 has been relatively stable? I'm just not sure.
That's a really good question.
We could hope. I mean,
we could hope.
What's the question?
So there's been a plummet among Christian liberals since 2007, and this 25% plummet. In the opening of the framing is that although there's still been a national decline among identified Christians, it's been relatively stable in the past 5 years. That's as a whole. And I'd be just curious if the liberal Christians have been so plummeting, if they're plummeting maybe less.
I don't know. I wish I knew that. But I do think, if this is related, I do think, Forge Hill Church, I'll just speak of the church, and a progressive, liberal, wonderful congregation, real leaders, faithful. These are people that are deep in their own prayer life and fellowship and all that. But it used to be a 1,500 member congregation, it's now 450. Now that's from 25 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. Yeah, 40 or 50 years ago. In Cleveland Heights, now the demographic of Cleveland is shrinking. White flight has taken many people further east, and so inner-ring suburbs, all of that affects, of course, the demographics and church size. But there used to be 6, and Bob Arnold was there, and this was the case. There were 6 Presbyterian churches within like 4 miles of each other, all of which had at least 500 members. Fairmount had 2,000. Church of the Covenant had 1,000. Forest Hill was 1,000. And now there are 3 left, and we all kind of share the same political bent. So I don't know what that means. I think people who are still very spiritual and seeking just aren't finding what they're looking for in most churches. So I do think there's been, I mean, the study did say that it has plateaued some, and it wasn't quite as steep a decline as what they found 10 years ago when they did it, but it's still declining in all various churches. But that's a great question.
We moved obviously back to the country just a few months ago, and we spent time out of the country during COVID, most of it. But what I've been so shocked, of course, is this abrupt transition, seeing Starbucks, seeing McDonald's, these places are emptied out and meant not to hold people. And I just wonder if that may be a wider trend. That, not to say churches are being built not to hold people, but there's a mentality that applies, whether it's a restaurant or a walk-in clinic, or we don't want you to stay. We want you to come in and get out. And so this kind of mentality that's around the architecture, but not really the architecture, but really since the pandemic, is don't hang around, don't loiter, and don't maybe rub shoulders, figuratively and literally. And as a result, people, younger men especially, know about these things. They're afraid of talking to people. They're afraid of having eye contact. They're afraid of introducing themselves to strangers. So they're perfect targets for a kind of militant, side of it, where it's just like, you shouldn't be afraid, and I'll show you how not to be afraid. This is the way you not to be afraid. You should be making it afraid. Right? So that's different. But I'm talking about the spaces themselves is really shocked me and my wife coming back to the US.
I think it's such a wonderful comment. It's something for us all to remember, this church to remember as you're going through this transition. Like, what about the architecture? What are the messages? That, intentionally or unintentionally, the unintentional messages. Who's really welcome here? How does space move? Right? Are we really welcoming folks in ways that make them feel like they want to rub shoulders and get to know one another? Those are great questions and should be at the forefront of our work. Yeah.
Yeah, so to me, it comes down to a question, because these are kind of alarming because we're seeing trends. And relevancy. What's the relevancy in our lives? And that's an overarching question that the church needs to ask itself.
No, you're very right about that. Yes, please, Anne.
Well, the one thing that jumps off the page for me is 70% believe in heaven, hell, or both. And that just stunned me.
And why does that stun you?
There's no question about how many believe that you should help marginalized people or, follow the life of Jesus, or but this believing in hell or heaven or both, just, whoa, where 7 out of 10 people that are running to, they're saying here, and I'm just, not in Santa Fe, I would hope.
That surprised me too, Alice. Way.
Yeah. I don't even know why they would ask such a thing.
Well, these have always been, I think, markers of a traditional Orthodox faithfulness, the way people could talk about it.
And it's hard to say, no, I don't believe.
And it's kind of hard. It'd be interesting to know what particular question.
Yeah.
But it would seem to me the thing that I took some, I think, sort of positive remark from was, yes, there's all these declines, but you still have like lots and lots of people who, their understanding of heaven and hell and life after may be very diverse and shows kind of thinking. But there's still this leaning into the mysteries that we all circle, life and death, how we are supposed to live. What is my relationship to others? And I have found in my limited sphere that young people are in some ways, even more than my generation, really wanting to lean into issues of great concern, like the environment, most of all. Like, I'll share this story, because I found this to be revealing. So we're at a Thanksgiving table at our house. Kids are all around, and we're talking, and I know, just to keep conversation going, we have little questions. And the question, I think it was framed something like, if there was 80% certainty that in 50 years the earth would be uninhabitable, would you have children? And both my daughters don't know, right? And in fact, they were confessing, I don't even know if I want to bring children into the world right now. Wow. And I thought, but 80% now. 80, not 100, 80, and who knows what's going to happen in 50 years. I tried to frame it like that the other day. But it was just interesting. So we do have that, but my children are also absolutely caring and careful about the environment, about the status of women, about racial equity, and the need to repair and restore. They are really involved in these things, and somehow they're finding the connection outside the church, which is interesting. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about identity and how your description of the women in DC during the process as part of their identity is.
As power women.
And thinking about how people identify these days. I think our age group or the older people, well, I don't know. But I'm wondering if younger people identify more with those issues as somebody who's strong on environment or an environmental advocate, and rather than I'm Christian, or I go to Presbyterian church, or I don't know. I mean, I don't think that we identify as our faith or as our church.
Okay. Let's hold that, because I think that's an important thing to unpack. Yeah.
Well, I mean, my daughter's 27, and she's seen systems breaking down.
Right.
I mean, COVID. And why would they invest in an institution that puts in a hole? So, they're seeing this in real time in their lives. So I think it's just like almost a blanket mistrust of organizations and institutions. Tony wants.
Yeah, Tony.
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time with young adults because I teach at a university, and we have these conversations a lot, and they're very aware of my faith and the role that my faith plays in it. But I think, what I would say that I hear from them a lot is, their frustration about the church's action or inaction, as it is, that there are all of these issues. You're exactly right. This is what is pressing, whether it's environmental or racism or social injustice and marginalization or, immigration or all of these sorts of things. Young people who are more liberal to progressive care deeply about these issues, but they see the church as irrelevant, as being a place where people talk about it, but don't actually do anything. Or that, it has to take, years of going through zillions of committees and, having reports done and so forth. And, they're plugging into other parts of the community that are active now, that are actually out doing things, whether it's more of a service orientation, whether it's more protest or activism or some combination. But that's what I find. And I think they really ask me, okay, you have these beliefs, you have this faith, your church has progressive viewpoints, but what's going on? What's happening? Where are you? Because we're out on the front lines and we don't feel like the church is there with us.
Tony, thank you. I think that's a really apt description of where so many people are. And I would add to that, they feel church is irrelevant. they certainly want to run away from anything, at least people that I spoke to and I was writing a book about. I'm not a social scientist, so those of you who are more might see lots of holes. It was just conversational, anecdotal, and then from 30 years in ministry, like, you know, what are the themes? But certainly the relevancy of the church, anti-institutional, and I found very much anti-dogmatic and anti-doctrinal. They don't give a donkey's tail about the fine points of your confessions. You know, I did find, and I'm jumping ahead because I see only about five minutes, but there is, and so the book that I was writing, I start off by talking about relationship with Alice, spelled Alice from Dallas, but she's Italian from her heritage. She grew up in a church that was atheist, and the church was the worst institution the world had ever known, and it was a cause of all the war and all the social injustice. But she became sort of our fourth child. She was best friends with my daughter, Sarah. So in her 30s, she's now like 30, she wrote me, and I've been writing on Substack, some of the workshopping ideas, and I do a lot of writing. But she wrote me this response that just said, I'm just so grateful because only as I've become, like, I'm beginning to rethink Christianity a little bit, and I'm particularly interested in prayer. An experience of something that gets her out of herself, that both gives her a sense of what? You know, sort of an inner peace, an inner awareness, an outward connection to something that is larger, that gives her reason to stay motivated to get involved in her political action and social action. Now, I don't think Alice is ever going to become a Christian. And frankly, I don't care about but she may never become, you know, a God's child Presbyterian, for goodness sake. But yet she's leaning into that. Now, I would see she's one of those people that does believe in spirit, does believe in a sense of, a very unrefined, but a consciousness of something beyond and greater, and she wants to be connected to that. And so it just raises, and then so she's one of, like, literally 100 people that I've been in contact with that are in the same area. So in some sense, I see this as a sign of hopefulness, that we have these kind of shared hooks about parts of our identity. But it is a challenge, like, how is Forest Hill Church back in Cleveland, as they're looking for a new pastor, going to have a future, a relevancy, if all our young people are saying church isn't relevant? And I'm, you know, how does that sit with First Presbyterian Church? So we got a lot of things we got to be thinking about, but at the end of the day, I feel hopeful, and I don't know, have any of you watched Somebody Somewhere on HBO? Almost every episode, as I get older, I'm a crier. I can't help it. Music gets me, and I see these things. When I see people in beautiful relationships, I just can't help it touching them. But it's an HBO. It's raw. I'm warning you. You may not want to. It's raw, but it takes place in Manhattan, Kansas. So that's where Kansas State is, I think. Right? And it's about this group of interesting, what our society would label kind of misfits. So I want to be careful about that. I don't want to label them misfits, but, you know, there's a gay man who's been bullied. There's a woman who lost her sister and is just seeking. It's just this wild group, and they're all seeking for something. And they end up going to what they call choir practice. And choir practice is on Tuesday nights in an old sort of warehouse where there's food and there's drink, and then there's an open mic, and people kind of, really one of the most moving is the woman who lost her sister, who used to have, and she does have this gorgeous voice, and she's very involved in high school choir, and her friend brings her to this choir practice, and out of the blue he says, come up and sing. And she hasn't sung in like 15 years. And somehow she gets pulled up in front of this crowd who are just so happy to have her and see her. And she sings that wonderful Janis Joplin, Little Piece of My Heart, My Baby. I don't know if you know that, but for my generation, and I can sing that. And you can just see her. She just like opens. And everybody, and getting the goosebumps again, but it was just so overwhelming. And I remember this man sitting there listening to her, and he leans over the person next to him and goes, now that's church. And it just made me think, how do we create places where people are bringing their questions? It really is the university at its best, where people are interested, leaning in with curiosity to the questions and loving their questions until they sort of bump into a direction that moves them on to maybe the next series of questions. I've always been inspired, I don't know it by heart, but I think it's, let me see if I can read it, because I've always loved this quotation from Rilke, who was a great German. He writes, be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. I think that gives us some sense of where the church might be. Instead of getting answers, be a place where people are free to answer their questions and somehow in community come up with like, well, I think this. Or, don't trust the pastor that just because we have seminary training that we got the answer. Rather, our role is to try to give you the experience of being loved and connected with one another, to rub shoulders, to lean into the mystery of the Scripture and have it come alive for you. And in that back and forth, we get new truth and new, a hopeful future. So, I'm sorry, ran out of time. That really crushed. I just skipped about 80% of my outline, but you go, right, Professor? You go where the kids are. So I don't know if I did a good job. Well, the name is Somebody Somewhere on HBO. Like I said, when you see it, it's so beautiful. You'll love parts of it, but there are some raw parts. You'll be like, the minister told us to watch that. But yes, I did. It's a beautiful show. You'll be moved by it. Anyway, I think there's hope for the church. I'm praying for you as you go into your next stage of finding out what the mission of this church is going to be. And I think that your comments about even architecture and movement. And one thing I learned, those of us who've been in churches for a long time, just take for granted that this is there and that's there. Talk to people who are new. Because they may have, they're coming because they love the church. But they may have experiences of like, where's an on-ramp to that? I don't know how to get involved. People seem friendly, but how do you go to the next level? I know what the church stands for, but I can't find my way to, where's Pope Paul? Are we in Pope Paul? No, Pope Paul's down there. See, I'm with you. I don't even know where I'm going. Anyway, God bless you. And now the third leg of the triathlon. I want a tattoo like the Iron Man. I did FPC. I did the FPC trial. Anyway, God bless you. See you in church. Thank you, Bob. Good to see you, everybody.